you can't do a gospel tune for me.
A gospel tune?
Eh.
Which one?
Everybody got to know who Jesus is.
Everybody don't know who Jesus is already, man.
But more you play, make people know. Some people don't know who Jesus is, you know. So you want to play.
You tell them who Jesus is.
No, just more you play that tune, you know.
No, you tell them who Jesus is now.
No, when listening to you, we talk.
Me say, you tell them who Jesus is. Me not have that tune there.
All right.
This is Black History Month, and if nobody else not do it, we do it. We spend a whole month and deal with history, African history, black history, whatever you want to call it. They have to make you hear things where you never hear before, and make you vex about what you hear. But they have to do all of that, I'm upset. And then you go to your bed or tomorrow or next day, you think about a lot of things where you hear. Yes, and analyze it for yourself and go investigate it. Most of all, go and investigate what you hear. Don't just take what we hear, what you say, what we say, or what we play. Because I think that now, we decide so we're going to use the social media platform to teach the people them, rather than have to turn them in an idiot. Yes, it can be a good learning experience to find out a lot of things. We depend on that little thing they will name iPhone, cell phone. You know, so we go do it for you. Since you know, go gather up information. We gather up information for you and send it out the back. So use it, help to make the people them see clearer, not dull them sight by just frivolously, wantonly. I use the phone like them is puppet. We use it and I show you how radio can use it to really bring a different clarity, a different understanding to how we do it. So tonight, we are continuing the journey. Black History Month, Woodson Carter, brethren who start this Black History Month thing. It was 1 week, now it's 1 month. And even to that, people still say it's too short. It's too short and them not do nothing to make the little 29 days where we have be worthwhile and fruitful. And I said, boy, Black History Month longer than that, you know. Or we get the shortest month. We don't get no short month. We don't get no short month. That's it. And we don't know 1 month. So we will continue the journey. Today with you, as we say, we are going at the Black History Month vibes. You know, we not follow nobody. You understand? We are doing thing. We want to get up all the students them who come to the talk a while ago. For the university, we were there. Just come from up there. We did one left, we don't catch us so. But we actually did catch it. When we have a lady there will drive. We don't know, she's supposed to go run, drive. And them racing car driver, boy. She not easy. She not easy at all. When she ready to step brace and go run car. Anyway, she make her reach us so. I will give thanks for that. And as we are saying, we're going to go through the paces. But you know, sexuality, you know, if things are going on, advertisement take up the space them, so
40 million of us were stolen from the motherland, stolen into 500 years of night. The truth died in the dungeons that now lay empty on the coast of lands that we would never see again. Mother Africa would populate the Americas with her sons and daughters in the millions. Nations and civilizations would be built on their backs. Their bodies now lie in the unmarked annals of history. No more do those ghostly ships anchor in our harbors. No more do we hear the cladding of rusting chains of the coffle gangs. But still, until this day, the silent wind that blows across this ancient land has a bitter requiem that lingers in every corner of our hearts. The souls of those lost to Mother Africa sleep in anguish, scattered to the four winds. 500 years later, the traumatic legacy of that period of our history would still chain our minds and arrest our development. Our mother tongues, our scripts, our culture, our history, our faiths were silenced so that we could not pass on the tales of our glorious legacy or the horrors that befell us. In time, the only tales we knew were the lies that they told us.
Slavery or systems of servitude of one form or another have always been a feature of human history. The word slave is derived from the Slavic people who were the primary source of European slaves for centuries. Slavery in the ancient Mediterranean cultures was a mixture of debt slavery, punishment for crimes, and the enslavement of prisoners of war. Undoubtedly, a majority of slaves were condemned to agricultural or industrial labor and lived hard lives. In some of the city-states of Greece and in the Roman Empire, slaves were a very large part of the economy. However, the disgrace which escorted and distinguishes the transatlantic chattel slave trade is in its sheer inhumanity, the ultimate degradation and dehumanization of a targeted ethnic group, the reduction of human beings to mere commodities, transferable labor units made void of language, religion, culture, and history. Chained to the chattelization of Africans was the most horrific feature of chattel slavery, mental slavery. And it is this mental slavery that would be the most enduring legacy of the brutality visited upon African people. For after 500 years, these mental shackles would prove the hardest to break.
Slaves? Oh no. We had bond servants, vassals. Olauda Iquiano was a servant. Jaja was a servant. They lived with us, ate with us, and even married from amongst us. Ali Colon, who later called himself Sunni Alibert, became a common soldier and then ascended the ranks to become the military ruler of Songhai. He bravely fought the British slavers advancing into the interior. In Bonu, vassals were legal administrators of provinces. Hausa kings used vassals as ambassadors and generals in armies. In Yoruba land, the unfree of the Alifani also rose to great power. These men and women were part of our extended family. They were not free, but freedom could be purchased and was their ultimate destiny. Many unfree people ascended from ranks to exceed their masters. Some remained unfree, but with such autonomy, it was only a technical term. They walked freely amongst us, and some of them ran successful businesses and accumulated great wealth. Moreover, these unfree Africans were men and women. They had souls, and they had culture, language, and humanity.
Our history did not begin with slavery, for in the sands of ancient Egypt we forged civilizations, and in Axum, Nubia, Ta-Seti, and the great Islamic kingdoms, Mali, Songhai, and in the south, Great Zimbabwe. While Europe crawled in darkness, we fostered art, astrology, universities, mathematics, physics, and agriculture. But history would have you believe that we were mere passive participants, oblivious like leaves in the wind to the swaying tide of civilization and advancement. But our historical fate was held in contempt by hateful pens, stinking indelibly of prejudice.
Slavery, they say, was nothing new to this ancient land. They say Africans sold Africans before Europeans landed in Africa. However, to use the word slavery to describe what Europeans saw in Africa is one of the greatest linguistic injustices, a semantic perversion of epic proportion. The line that defines what is and isn't slavery is blurred, and there is no secret that when ethnic groups and nationalities fought in wars, the vanquished were given into a system of subservience to the victors. Askew rules of war. However, let not the word slavery allow an analog to what happened on the plantations of Jamaica, Brazil, and America. In Africa, there were no fields filled with men and women toiling away at the crack of a whip. There was no place where slaves outnumbered their enslavers. Slavery did not exist within Africa, but serfdom, servitude, or vassalship did, as it did in most of Europe and the rest of the world. In addition, this vassalship was scattered and infrequent. It was never the commerce of the land. In most African societies, there was very little difference between the free peasant and the feudal vassal peasant. Vassals of the Songhai Muslim Empire were used primarily in agriculture. They paid tribute to their masters in crop, and service, but they were slightly restricted in custom and convenience. These non-free people were more an occupational caste, as their bondage was relative. In the Kanem-Bornu Empire, vassals were three classes beneath the nobles: Kembe, Kalia, and Zusana. Although Kembe were free compared to the Zusana, it was a fact invisible to the naked eye. Marriage between captor and captive was far from rare, blurring the anticipated roles. These captives could accumulate great wealth, and some of them rose to the highest ranks within the society, either as soldiers, merchants, or as politicians.
I want you to listen, you know. I want you to listen, because that was very important what the man just said. I talk about white people slavery, and when them go to Africa, them see something will look like slavery, whereas it wasn't like them, what them did I do. And we have to figure that out. People always talk about slavery that exists in Africa. But there's nowhere in Europe that a slave, well, not in Europe, there was nowhere the Europeans that take an African and carry him go England and work him, and then him eventually become richer than him slave master and have a house like him slave master and was respected in him community like him slave master. Because in Africa, that is what was happening. People who was serving other people were white people called slave. These people rise up to become very powerful people in them community and nation. It's not like you beat them. There's nowhere, as can't wait the man I say, in Africa, you didn't have slaves outnumber the slave master. Nowhere where slaves outnumber the slave master. So, continue listening.
The most telling consequence of the transatlantic chattel enslavement of African people was the birth of modern racism. It can be asked, why did nobles, priests, kings, and common folk alike tolerate the barbarity perpetuated against Africans? How was such a horrendous trade allowed to exist in full view of morality and humanity? The transatlantic slave trade was the most profitable industry the world has ever seen. And 30 million Africans to furnish the West. It then took further millions upon millions of African descendants, generations after generations, to build the modern era. Slavery was beyond a shadow of a doubt responsible for the backbone of the modern world. It was the catalyst to the Industrial Revolution. No enterprise in the history of humanity was more profitable and lucrative. Considering the necessity for slaves in all Europe had to gain from using them, justifications had to be fortified to abate the moral dilemma. Arguments matured alongside this morbid human trade to justify the unjustifiable.
They sold each other. Blacks are animals, built
We are
like
saving them from
oxen to serve each
cannibals.
other. It is their purpose. Blacks were uncivilized, and we civilized
their
them
purpose.
and industrialized them. They sold each in our infinite mercy.
Africans could not have a history. Africans could not be attached to greatness, as this would beg the question: if these people were capable of science, engineering, social structure, kingdoms, how can we then treat them as beasts of burden? How can a people who forged Timbuktu, Axum, Kanem-Bornu, Egypt, Nubia, Great Zimbabwe, ancient Ghana, Songhai, Sokoto, Monomotapa be now mere labor units, movable chattel, branded like cattle, confined, derobed, whipped, and reduced? History narrates that the European, in their mercy, did Africans a tremendous favor by bringing them to work in well-nurtured plantations in the West, allowing their lives to be touched by a white god, delivering them from savagery to culture, civilization, and industrialization. Also in the 18th century, the birth of narrow racial definitions emerged. The Negro, a creature with thick lips, black skin, flat broad noses, woolly hair, characteristics that became socially accepted by Europeans as ugly. This narrow definition of African shined from the reality that indigenous African people were physically the most diverse ethnicity on the planet. In indigenous Africa, you can find flat noses among the Bakongo, straight fine noses as among the Ethiopians, Somalis, Fulani, Tuareg, and Wadabi. Short hair, straight hair, curly hair, light skin, dark skin, very tall and very short. From Berber to Bushman, all are part of the African race. Not only were the physical features assigned to Africans considered ugly, but also African traits and African customs became bywords for lazy, barbaric, and primitive. History began to ebb out of favor for the African. Every greatness that was African was explained away. Egypt was geographically removed from Africa and its glorious past assigned to the Arabs, who invaded the region in the late 7th century. They then claimed the Egyptians' race was a mystery, but Greek writer Herodotus, who walked with them, wrote,
"Black skin with woolly hair resembling the Ethiopians."
The Coptic Christians and others, such as Napoleon, were so appalled by the African features obvious in the Egyptian art that they smashed the broad noses and thick lips where they found them. Europeans later constructed invisible lines called North Africa and Sub-Sahara Africa, bywords for civilized and uncivilized respectively. Africa was said by David Hume to be of no historical significance, a place without history. The wealthiest aspects of Africa was systematically underpinned, and ancient Africa was confused with modern post-colonial destroyed Africa, as if the dire condition of Africa today was how it was in antiquity. Volumes of books forged a unified idea in one of the greatest conspiracies to confiscate the history of an entire continent from its people. Academia, media, legislation, religion, culture all worked in tandem to sustain and maintain the suppression of Africans, historically, socially, culturally, mental, and physically. The presence of African civilizations such as Islamic West Africa, Nubia, Christian Ethiopia, and Zimbabwe were labeled as freak occurrences that benefited from external non-African influences. History was written with Africa on the outside, and thus Africa never was seen to have fostered or played any part in the features Europe referred to as civilized. Such was the arrogance born from the chattelizing of a people. The voiceless Negro became defined, aimless, and helpless. This campaign over hundreds of years rooted an inferiority complex in the minds of Africans and a superiority complex in the minds of Europeans. Many who hated the cruelty of slavery still never saw Africans as their intellectual equals. This was the precursor to the modern social dilemma and the greatest legacy of slavery, racism. History has buried the trauma of the Arab slave trade in the sand. While Europeans targeted men in West Africa, the Arab trade primarily harvested the women of East Africa to serve as domestic slaves, wet nannies, and sex slaves in the infamous harems. This trade trickle over millennia is estimated to have taken 10 million Africans via the eastern route to India, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, and also via the Trans-Sahara route to North Africa and the Mediterranean, where in slave markets such as Ceuta, Morocco, Africans were purchased to work as servants in Spain, Portugal, and other European countries. This trickle trade really only boomed in the 18th and 19th century. Prior to this period, the trade between Arabia and Africa was more focused on iron, ivory, and animal products. However, there is no doubt that this slave trade is one of the oldest in the world and still exists behind closed doors in Sudan, Mauritania, and parts of the Middle East. In Lebanese and Arabian households, away from human rights, Ethiopian girls are abused and raped. In Mauritania, the color class system is still blatantly apparent to anyone brave enough to look. One of the biggest differences between Arab slaving and European slaving was that slaves were drawn from all racial groups, and they were rarely used as a means of crop production. Slaves were not the economic engine behind Arab economies. Arab slavery generally lacked large sugar plantations where slaves toiled to the crack of a whip in the hot sun. Unlike the European trade, the physical remnants today are very hard to measure. There are no ghettos, mental institutions, or prisons holding African people in disproportionate numbers. Many women stolen from Africa were stolen to serve the infamous Arabian harems. Their children were thus born free to Arab fathers and thus would have been heirs to wealth and status. Many African people thus rose to great stations by virtue of their Arab fathers, hence, for better or worse, facilitating the absorption of African culture and lineage into an Arab one. When Islam arrived, war and servitude were features of African and Arabian life. Judaism existed among certain Arab tribes as well as Christianity, and like them, Islam did not blatantly outlaw slavery. Islam did, however, blatantly outlaw chattel enslavement. The Quran, with every reference to slavery, asked the believer to free the slave as atonement for sin. The term emancipating a slave and feeding an orphan are repeated constantly throughout the Quran as acts which gain God's favor. Also, there were regulations which enhanced the pre-Islamic laws with respect to the treatment of enslaved people. They were entitled to good care, to the same clothing and food as their masters. These enslaved people were more akin to indentured servants in Europe than chattel slaves in the Americas. They are your brothers, whom Allah placed under your hands. Feed them with what you eat, clothe them with what you wear, and do not impose duties upon them which will overcome them. If you so impose duties, then assist them. Whomever kills his slave, we will kill him. Whoever slaps his slave or strikes him, his atonement is to free him. It became a fundamental principle of Islamic jurisprudence that the natural condition and therefore the presumed status of humankind was freedom. Despite this, there were the greedy and the vindictive that sought to make slaves of their Muslim brothers and sisters as well as other Africans. Because Islamic Sharia had laws pertaining to slavery, it was seen by the opportunist as a natural God-sanctioned feature of life. Conveniently, the numerous laws of manumission were given a social backseat. Overzealous Europeans have always overdocumented the Arab trade in enslaved Africans to alleviate their guilt concerning their own trade. Well, the Arabs did it too, became the common tone of contemporary historians. However, it is a well-known fact that Europeans in their artistic depiction of slave raids have always skillfully and intentionally portrayed slave raiders as Muslim Africans or Arabs. The most expensive enslaved group in Arabian societies were the eunuchs, who were castrated men drawn from Europe, but also Darfur, Abyssinia, Kordofan, and other African nations. Ironically, because of their lack of sexuality, they obtained great privileges while the women's privileges were due to their sexuality. Eunuchs were generally made by Coptic priests in Egypt. Young boys, victims from raids and wars, were subjected to the horrid, monstrous, unspeakable, insane process of castration without anesthesia, which had an 80% mortality. The price for surviving this ungodly, brutal act was a life of influence and luxury. Silk garments, Arabian thoroughbreds, jewels were bestowed on them to reflect the wealth of their masters. Strangely, eunuchs were both distinguished and greatly revered as elites of Arab societies, despite being enslaved. Clearly, slave did not mean downtrodden and oppressed. The actual word slave was far from taboo, as the most pious people were self-professed slaves of Allah. The Afro-Arab relationship was riddled with complexities lined in a cultural nexus. The greatest thing to appreciate is that the 18th century definition of black did not exist in this period, and some so-called Arabs were Arab linguistically, but racially African. There is, however, no doubt that when concepts introduced by racist Arabs came into the mix, that the status of the African in Arabian society became associated with the enslaved. Despite this, the legacy of the African presence in these Arab and later Turkish lands were far from that of absolute subjugation. Africans occupied senior military ranks. They administered provinces and managed the sacred mosques of Mecca. In the mid-11th century, the African Caliph al-Mustansir ruled Egypt with his mother, a Sudanese enslaved woman of remarkable strength of character. There are no such parallels in the New World. Even enslaved Africans played important roles in the history and politics of these regions up until and even including the First World War.
Balancing truth and the controversy, addressing the youth and their calamity, motivated by concern for the whole of our liberty, the promise of a new reality, the cutting edge of true intensity, sole provider for the whole of our family, the force of brutal non-conformity, the cutting edge.
The most celebrated resistance to peoples from East Africa. The Zanj were subjected to work in the cruel and humid salt pans of Shat al-Arab near Basra in modern-day Iraq. Conscious of their large numbers and oppressive working conditions, the Zanj rebelled. For some 14 years, they succeeded in achieving remarkable military victories and even building their own capital, Maqtara, the elect city, which at its peak was within 70 miles of Baghdad. Maqtara had huge resources that allowed the building of no less than 6 impregnable towns in which there were arsenals for the manufacture of weapons and battleships. Their achievements were even more impressive considering that they occurred at the height of the Abbasid Empire, an empire that presided directly over Iraq, Mesopotamia, and Western Persia, and indirectly over the territories from North Africa to Central Asia and from the Caspian Sea to the Red Sea. After the Zanj were finally crushed, the victorious Abbasid general Muwaffaq dismissed all claims of their masters who sought their return. Instead, Muwaffaq recognized their strength and incorporated thousands of Zanj into his own government forces. The effects of this powerful rebellion would echo in the Arab world, damping all attempts at mass labor enslavement until the 19th century, when European markets were furnished with spices and coconuts from Arab-controlled Zanzibar. Arab and Turkish history is littered with furious African uprisings. One other notable battle echoes in Arab history until today and was referred to as the Battle of the Blacks, which occurred by loyal Fatimas against Saladin in Egypt in 1169. Islam was founded in a multi-ethnic Arabia, 22 kilometers off the coast of the African continent. The Quranic accounts of the mighty forces of the Ethiopian general Abra, who marched towards Mecca with an arsenal of elephants, testifies to the power of this ancient Ethiopian empire. An empire that had annexed modern-day Yemen and parts of Saudi Arabia for centuries. Islam became a permanent feature in Africa when the Prophet Muhammad in 612 sent the first group of early Muslims to be protected by the Christian Negus of Ethiopia from Arab persecution. This was the first Hijra. Islam was thus spreading in Africa before it even reached Medina. The call to prayer, which echoes over Muslim lands today, was first carried on the lungs of one of the saints of Islam, Bilal the Ethiopian. Bilal was also treasurer of the early Islamic State. An entire chapter in the Quran is dedicated to Luqman. Luqman was an African who lived in pre-Islamic times, and according to Islamic tradition, is one of the wisest men the world has ever seen. Islam spread across to West Africa from as early as the 8th century by African traders and was firmly established by the 11th century. The peaceful, non-obstructive course Islam took in West Africa was mainly because those propagating the faith were culturally and ethnically identical to those receiving it. Also, the indigenous African religions had many features in common with Islam, such as animal sacrifice, communal prayer, celebrating ancestors, circumcision, polygamy, dowry bride gifts, and the spirit or jinn world. The African spirit world of Bori and Zar was bridged to the Islamic world of jinns, whom like African spirits could be friend or foe. Such similarities between Islam and indigenous African religions facilitated a general peaceful conversion and religious tolerance in West Africa. Islam hence left African culture uniquely African. Over the centuries, this Sufi Islam in time even reshaped Islamic culture in the lands beyond Africa, becoming the third largest Islamic sect. In parts of East Africa, the story of religious conversion is a bit more complex, and at times more akin to the slave master religious paradigm of the New World. When Islam proliferated in West Africa around the 9th century, one of the first universities was founded by African Muslims. It was called Sankore. Arabs and others came to Sankore, which was built in Timbuktu, to learn from African erudites who lectured on Islamic belief, Islamic jurisprudence, astrology, science, and many other subjects. Timbuktu was reputed for African erudition, where books and those who traded in books were the wealthiest elites of the merchant society. Some of the hidden histories of Africa are locked in as many as 700,000 Arabic manuscripts written by ancient African scholars. One of these, the Tariq-ul-Sadan, details the history of Islamic West Africa, but this manuscript remains inaccessible to non-Arabic speakers.
Yes, history we are talking about. History, black history, African history. Take a break and come for
the 18th century, the Arab slave trade took a brutal turn. The Portuguese had destroyed the Swahili coast, and Zanzibar emerged as the hub of wealth for the Arabian state of Muscat. By 1839, slaving became the prime Arab enterprise. The demand for slaves in Arabia, Egypt, and India, but more notable by the Portuguese who occupied Mozambique, created a wave of destruction on Eastern Africa. 45,000 slaves were passing through Zanzibar every year. To satisfy this demand, the Arabs hunted deep into the interiors of Africa. They followed ancient trails from Bagamoyo, Kilwa, where terror and destruction followed in their wake. Many documents speak of the road littered with the weak and the dying, the abandoned and the maimed, left with yokes around their necks. Many, as in the case of Kenya, became food for lions. Children who became a burden to the Koffel gang were brutally murdered in front of their mothers. The likes of Livingston would have witnessed this devastation firsthand, but history penned by Europeans recorded it as an epidemic characteristic of Africa, as opposed to a very recent genocide that was previously unprecedented in African history. Livingston was the precursor to colonialism. The colonial template was written on salvaging heathen souls for Jesus and civilizing them to be the cultural stepchildren of Europeans. Livingston is portrayed as the great white hope whom delivered Africans from this hell. Thus, in the name of humanity, Europeans, namely the British and the Belgians, conquered Africa to destroy Arab slaving. For Africans, one horror was traded for the horror that would deliver the mortal blow, colonialism.
Africa became the child of Europe, the infant that injured itself. The white man's innate burden was to remove the savagery from Africa, delivering Africans, the inventors of mathematics, ironmongery, husbandry, agriculture, astrology, to the status of civilized. Europe would save this childlike race of savages from Arabs and other marauding Africans. So sour was the milk that Europe fed to Africa that eventually some Africans would call Europe their mother and protector.
Yes. Serious thing.
Of Christianity in Africa prior to the Eurocentric blend introduced during slavery and colonialization is restricted to Eastern and Northern Africa. Abyssinia, modern-day Ethiopia, and Nubia, modern-day Sudan, are the only noted places to boast of an African version of this religion. Ethiopia is referred to in the Bible in the same breath as Persia and all the other great civilizations of this time. Judaism also has pre-existed in Africa like Islam from its genesis. Zephret, Moses' wife, and Queen of Sheba are two indisputable people from the African continent. The Falashas of Ethiopia and the Limba of Zimbabwe are some of the original ancient Jewish descendants of this religious order. The long existence of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all illuminate that Africans were not passive, but active components in the development of the modern world religions. What is crucial is that African people had African-centered views, which they blended with Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, allowing these religions to serve in their own collective progression and strength as opposed to their destruction. It is essential to note that it is not the Christian gospel or the Islamic gospel or the Jewish gospel that can be blamed for the actions of those who control them and use them by perverted interpretations to culturally dominate and enslave others. Any ideology can be arrested and taken from its original well-meaning course. This is the unfortunate nature of humankind. Christianity, like Judaism and Islam, does not outlaw domestic slavery. Slavery was a feature of the time which dealt with prisoners of war, debt, and criminals. It was integrated into the social fabric in which these three faiths were born into. In the case of Christianity, the numerous references to slavery do not facilitate racial chattel slavery, and from time to time insist on the basic need for humanity within slavery. Did not he that made me in the womb make him the slave? And did not one fashion us both? Job 31:15. However, both the Old and New Testament recognizes and accepts the institution of slavery. Numerous biblical references allude to equality, but slavery was a clear reality of the biblical Judeo-Christian societies. As for your male and female slaves who may belong to you, you may buy male and female slaves from the nations all around you. Also, you may buy slaves from the children of the foreigners who reside with you, whom they have fathered in your land. They may become your property. It is also clear that slavery is accepted in the New Testament as a fact of life. Some passages in the Pauline epistles even endorse it. Thus, in the epistle to Philemon, a runaway slave is returned to his master. In Ephesians 6, the duty owed by a slave to his master is compared with the duty owed by a child to his parent. Parents and masters are likewise enjoined to show consideration for their children and slaves. Thus it can be concluded all humans of the faith are equal in the eyes of God and in the afterlife. However, this equality did not extend to and hence was not recognized before the secular laws of man. One of the most destructive elements in the making of the slave master paradigm was Eurocentric Christianity's depiction of God, and subsequently the divine ethnic social dynamic which placed whites as masters, blacks as slaves. The blue-eyed, blonde-haired God cast an inferiority complex that would span every successive generation of African peoples. These images single-handedly upheld a system of subjugation and oppression. God is white, as your master is white. Obey God, and obey your master, for your master is God. Mental enslavement served the physical enslavement, as slaves were cast into the understanding that it was simply the way of the world, their lot in life. It pacified and eliminated the last notion of home from the displaced Africans. The rebellious and discontent emotions were appeased with the promise of heaven that would only come for a slave when they died after serving their master well. In time, those left in Africa and those in the New World thank God for the white man who saved them from so-called paganism and delivered them into glory. Noble African names like Aisha and Askia were replaced with trite European names like Elizabeth, Charles, and Johnny.
Some of us in this mental religious prison constructed by our oppressors gave absolute loyalty to our slave masters who became the parent, the representation of God on earth. A divine being, though harsh, still represented our best interest. It was thus the ultimate goal of the Negro to emulate the habits, customs, and precepts of the European. The master's loves and hates became our loves and hates. His code of dress became our code of dress. The pale skin and straight hair became the standard of beauty, and all means were taken to lighten the dark skin and unkink curly hair to look as Massa looked. In this social chaos, we became the cultural stepchild of Europe, living and dying within a European-defined framework.
The mechanism which delivered Europe's surge to dominance in the 15th century and on into the 21st century was capitalism. Capitalism arrested morality and acted as the driver for the materialistic growth of Europe. Capitalism was the engine behind the amassing of great wealth, the interest in conquest, and hence the interest in seafaring, which led to the development of long-term investments, sophisticated insurance, and legal partnerships to fund raids. Europe also profited from the wealth of immigrants, such as the Jews, whose skill with business and investment funded many of the later slave raids to Africa. Thus, when the European-African interface was initiated, there was a disparity which gave Europe an advantage.
A cruel wind blew from the north and scarred the Africa we knew. Our world was changing. The white man cut us where we were weak. The wound would open the door to every form of inequality and injustice. When their strange ships arrived on our horizon, we too often acted through the weakness of villages as opposed to the strength of nations. We had no idea that their arrival marked the closure of 100,000 years of noble history.
We followed south past the Canaries. The year was 1441. We hugged the West African coast, eager to appease Prince Henry, who pressed us to return with proof of the lands of the Moors we had seen. What better proof than a Moor himself? The crew was bursting with zeal as the Pope himself, hearing of our slave raids, blessed us and sanctified our crusade. He promised that God would forgive all our past sins for this noble conquest of the savages. We harbored and ventured inwards under the cloak of night. Then we approached two encampments of the Moors. We attacked with fury. So taken were they that they began to run with no order or consideration. Some of the men stood their ground and drew their assegais to confront us. That night, we took 10 prisoners, men, women, and children. By the time we returned to Portugal, our complement was 235 Moors. However, one of the Sanhaja chiefs convinced us that slaving was easier by trade rather than by war. Then they started to act as intermediaries, as Moors were procured from West Africa to Europe.
In the early days of Europe and Africa, trade flourished in a small way in the estuaries of Senegal at the mouth of the Gambia. The kingdom of the Muslim Jollof stretched as far as Sierra Leone and the Guinea coast. They traded their prisoners, gold, ivory, fine cotton for horses, silver, and articles of silk made in Grenada. Within 50 years, the trade had trebled, but still the slaving component was not the main interest, for gold was the glory of the enterprise. This was the era of mutual respect where Europeans held Africans in high regard. They were treated as noble civilized equals with very honorable and sophisticated trading systems. African ambassadors frequented Lisbon. Portuguese soldiers even fought in the armies of the Oba. In the 16th century, Britain and the rest of Europe, including France, had no real interest in slaving. It was really a Portuguese and Spanish occupation. In 1561, Queen Isabella engaged royal money in funding trading expedition with the Guinea coast. But here again, the focus was more on gold, palm oil, ivory, and pepper. Interestingly, France in those early days condemned slavery, and in 1571 declared that France, mother of liberty, permits no slaves. The overall picture was one of mutual trade, which furnished the European maritime nations and African coastal kingdoms with profit, development, and technological exchanges.
But this was not meant to last. The pendulum of time started to take a low, dark swing out of sync with Africa. Events 2,000 miles away in a place they called the New World were unfolding that would cast dark clouds over Mother Africa. And as the taste in the demand-driven trade changed from gold and ivory to black bodies, demand from the Americas consumed and set the scales out of balance. Like a virus, the trade shifted from mutual to unilateral, and as time escaped us, we fell like dominoes as destiny took us deeper into the dragon's mouth. Our world in a night was spiraling out of control, and we became like dust in a storm.
Cristobal Colon, a Spanish elite posing as an impoverished Italian, discovered that the land he discovered had been discovered around 30,000 years prior to his arrival. The new world that was discovered was rich with new opportunities for expansion and trade. But the daunting reality was that to build a new world, it would require a workforce. The local native Caribbean peoples were the first to suffer enslavement. In 1503, Queen Isabella ruled that only cannibals could be taken as slaves legally, which encouraged Europeans to identify various native Caribbean groups as cannibals. However, these people were not suited for plantation life. They were susceptible to European diseases and were not physically adapted to the intense demands. Europeans then sold their fellow countrymen into slavery to fill the ranks of the dying native Caribbean peoples. However, they called it indentured servitude.
Yes. May I tell you, history. The man cover everything. From the Jews to the Arabs to Islam, Christianity, chattel slavery, servitude, all of them. Very important document for here and really take it in. Very important. Because you're not going to get that at school. You're not going to get it at school. And a matter of fact, you're going to get it nowhere else but right here, so. Yes. Anyway, it's midnight in Jamaica. Midnight, 12 o'clock.
Brothers and sisters, this is
Cristobal Colon, a Spanish elite posing as an impoverished Italian, discovered that the land he discovered had been discovered around 30,000 years prior to his arrival. The new world that was discovered was rich with new opportunities for expansion and trade. But the daunting reality was that to build a new world, it would require a workforce. The local native Caribbean peoples were the first to suffer enslavement. In 1503, Queen Isabella ruled that only cannibals could be taken as slaves legally, which encouraged Europeans to identify various native Caribbean groups as cannibals. However, these people were not suited for plantation life. They were susceptible to European diseases and were not physically adapted to the intense demands. Europeans then sold their fellow countrymen into slavery to fill the ranks of the dying native Caribbean peoples ranks of the dying native Caribbean peoples. However, they called it indentured servitude. Ovando, the Spanish governor of Hispaniola, complained not to export any more Africans as they were aggressive and reinforcing the ranks of resistance among the Native Americans. These early imported Muslim Africans were proving hard to handle. But as labor shortage got critical due to the waning of the indigenous population, Ovando reassessed the situation and demanded that Africans be sent. Royal decree targeted the Guinea coast in a mandate which was to avoid the Islamic African influence. However, over the duration of the trade, approximately 30% of those sent to the New World were Muslims. Europe's sweet tooth placed an increasing demand for slave labor. In the late 1400s, the Atlantic islands of Madeira and Sao Tome became leading centers of world sugar production and plantation slavery. By 1530, Portugal had established settlements in Brazil where over 40% of all enslaved Africans ended up. Now that the trade was in full swing, nothing could stop it. It was the backbone of the Spanish-American enterprise. The Spanish king was in receipt of export tax in addition to the licenses which were per head of enslaved person. This heavy taxation led to wholesale smuggling and distortion of records of Africans actually exported from the continent. Slaving was the most profitable commodity in the 18th century, and Senegambia exported an average of 2,000 to 3,500 slaves each year. The largest market for enslaved people was in the French Empire, especially in the colony of Haiti. Over nearly 400 years, Spain, Portugal, Prussia, France, Holland, Denmark, and Sweden would descend like vultures to rip Africa apart. John Hawkins, a devout Christian, while stationed in the Cape Verde Islands, pondered upon the growing prosperity that was to be had from slave trading. He saw the Africans as goods at the first stage of a triangle trade which procured Africans from Africa. This trade then took them to the New World in exchange for sugar and pearls. The trade then departed the New World and terminated in England, where goods for trade with Africa were loaded. Spain and Portugal had a head start to a lethargic Britain, who initially opposed slaving. However, Queen Isabella II gradually came around to the prospect of building an empire on the backs of blacks. English Parliament passed an act legalizing the purchase of slaves in 1545. 100 years prior to this, the Pope declared that possession of slaves was the right of all Christians. As the trade progressed, the items traded with Africa were of no sustainable value. While Europeans' wealth increased, African merchants toyed with silly trinkets, images of a white god, inferior cloth, cheap alcohol, damp gunpowder, old pots and pans, and all forms of assorted garbage not generally fit for European consumption. If Europe and Africa began their ill-fated relationship as near equals, the influx of European goods, particularly of firearms and alcohol, slowly disrupted the equilibrium of West African cultures. To Europe, the enslaved workforce brought power and wealth, but to Africa, the so-called trade only brought more efficient means to capture their neighbors and alcohol to corrode societies.
When spring water flows into the desert takes. It knows not of giving, only of taking. The religious and political power structure of West African states were particularly susceptible to the corrosive effects of the slave system. In the Niger Delta, the priest had traditionally imposed heavy fines on men who offended an oracle. It was relatively easy on their part to discover an increasing number of offenses which could only be expedited by a payment of slaves, who could then be sold profitably to European traders. Royal and vassal, servant and master, Muslim and Ifa, none were spared. As Europeans depleted the coast, those left were faced with a daunting choice: sell or be sold.
Although the slave trade made an extremely small number of chiefs wealthy, it ultimately undermined local economies and political stability as villages' vital labor forces were shipped overseas as slave raids and civil wars became commonplace. A few wicked, greedy Africans colluded with the Europeans, but traders are present in all societies. Jewish people had traders that sent their fellow men to Nazi gas chambers. Indians, Native Americans, Europeans, all have traders. The discontent, the maladjusted. It is a condition common to all human beings. But malicious historians seek to overemphasize this natural feature of human behavior to justify and mitigate the horror levied on Africans. This is the way in which African people are blamed for their own Holocaust. Africa was sent into social suicide, and as slavery evolved, their ghostly ships only had to anchor at the coast and bleed Africa. And they didn't even have to get off the boat.
There are those from among the shadows that say it was my brother who sold me to the white man, that it was my neighbor who gave my children to the thirsty sea. There are those who are content with self-admonishment to justify the trade because they say we sold our own people to them. We sold, they bought. A deal gone bad, but a deal nonetheless. Oh, how they came and watched us while we laughed. They watched us while we played. They watched us while we argued. And they planned and plotted a plot that would only have one beneficiary. They armed some of us with their guns, which made for coward war, and they left others with their spears. They set tribe against tribe, nation against nation, Oyo against Dahomey, Ashanti against Ga, to populate their plantations. They created such a vacuum on the coast of Africa that it turned against itself. Innocent and naive we were to trust, but that was our way. First, they were doing us a favor. They took the bad of our societies, prisoners of war, the thieves and the murderers. But then they would always come back and ask for more, and more, and more, and more. Some of us, a very few of us, with their guns got greedy and betrayed their brothers and sisters. But don't blame all of us for the treachery of a few. Stirred up the politics of Africa to keep us warring because they knew when there were wars, there were slaves. Queen Nzinga pleaded with the Portuguese, find another trade, some other commodity other than my beautiful African people. But the white man set her neighbor against her until her plea was no more. The marabouts fought numerous jihads, but they were outnumbered, and our world was fading.
At no period in the annals of the slave trade did Africans simply acquiesce to the imperialist advances of the Europeans. Resistance was an everyday feature of the trade. Resistance took place in the village, on the coast, on the ships, and upon arrival in the New World. As the Portuguese slavers moved period in the annals of the slave trade did Africans simply acquiesce to the imperialist advances of the Europeans. Resistance was an everyday feature of the trade. Resistance took place in the village, on the coast, on the ships, and upon arrival in the New World. As the Portuguese slavers moved further south into Ndogo Kingdom, they became more intrusive and violent. While Africans such as Queen Nzinga of Matamba resisted their every advance. Around 1673 to 1677, Muslim clerics called marabouts led an anti-slavery revolt and tried to topple the slave-trading African aristocracies of the Senegambian states. With French armaments brought from St. Louis, the African aristocrats were able to crush the revolt. However, the passionate effort by the Marabout warriors caused a large conversion to Islam among the peasantry, who were the main victims of slavery.
In less than the time one takes to talk about it, these unfortunate creatures.
It is hard to imagine how many of these poor souls died, but for those who chattelized us, it serves their conscience to mitigate our numbers in their records. Some say 40 million just from the transatlantic slave trade alone. Some say much higher. It has been estimated that the population of Africa in the mid-19th century would have been 50 million instead of 25 million had slavery not taken place. They play with words and say 10 million arrived, but ask them how many left, how many came unrecorded, how many died in the dungeons, and how many died in the capture before reaching the coast. How many more died in the villages where we fought for our lives, and how many died aboard the ships? 1/3 to 1/2 were lost in the dark voyage to the Americas. Pirates made numerous undocumented raids that were never recorded. It is a known fact that the Portuguese trade was underestimated by 50% and the British trade by 1/3. Then there were those who died by the indirect actions of the slavers, those left to starve, those who died of European diseases. Many Africans either committed suicide or were thrown overboard to lighten the ship or to make insurance claims. Sharks learned over the dark centuries to follow these vessels of death on their voyages to the Americas.
An often neglected study within history is the value of population demographics as a function of time. 30 million people 500 years ago is not equivalent to 30 million people today. Hence, to appreciate the African Holocaust on the population, we must look at these numbers in today's figures. So 30 million 500 years ago becomes more like 200 million in our current time. Not only was the trade of demographic significance in the aggregate population losses, but also in the profound changes to settlement patterns, epidemiological exposure, and reproductive and social development potential. Within a few generations, thousands of years of social structure and stability fell into ruin.
Days turned into weeks. We stopped in Salaga for a few days. From there, we were marched from village to village, changing hands from one slave driver to another. The horrid din of the cladding of the rusted chains could be heard on our every approach. Over the centuries, the sound became too familiar. And even lions and vultures followed the 300-year death march across Africa. We followed the river for a while, and then came to a village where 20 or more canoes awaited us. We changed hands again. We drifted in near silence through 2 nights and 1 day, and arrived on the coast on Juma. Friday, the day when we would have dressed in our glorious robes and listened to the elders speak. But now, we were bones, clothed only in our skin. It is here that we saw the white man en masse. They were busy trading, stocking, accounting, and arguing with treacherous black bodies wearing white masks. A terrible sight to us. We followed the beaten trail along the coast until there, in the distance, a large fort rose above the tree line. It was the place only whispered in nightmares. El Mina, the mine.
So we continue the journey.
El Mina was the first important European port on the Gold Coast. It was established to trade in gold, spices, ivory, and other African artifacts. El Mina was to serve as a trading post which would protect trade and traders from possible attacks by other European states and local people. The castle was taken over by the Dutch in 1637, who kept control for 274 years until the British seized it in 1872. The castle was used to store enslaved Africans along with ivory and gold while they waited for slave ships to arrive and collect them. It is estimated that 6.7 million Africans passed through El Mina's doors of no return, the highest volume of Africans for any slaving station.
In the tomb called El Mina, we stewed for months in small, cramped, dark dungeons. Ventilation was poor, disease was rife. Occasionally, we would be allowed to exercise our arms and legs. This was the prime occasion for the white officers to cast their cavernous eyes over us as we were routinely paraded through the courtyard. Every time we were walked in front of them, we knew that a few of us would be selected and taken and cleaned up and then raped over and over and over again. But there was a twist to these dreadful acts. If by chance one of us became pregnant, we would be set free and allowed to remain in Africa. In the courtyard, there was a cell that was used for prisoners who tried to rebel against their captors. These men were condemned to death and left to starve. Close by was a special prison with raised earth like seats. This was the place for the prized virgins. Because of our strict cultures, most unmarried girls were virgins. They would fetch a special prize and be favored in the long nights by senior officers. Across the way, standing in ironic juxtaposition, was a Christian church where the European officers worshipped, singing hymns praising God to the background of the most sorrowful and pitiful dirge of death and suffering, which bemoaned from the haunts of the dire, dismal dungeons. One day, 1521, after the whites prayed to their God with sweet smoking sticks and large clanging bells, the fittest of us were gathered together and marched towards a narrow corridor. The mass of bodies obstructed my view as we were jostled forward, persuaded in the rear with a sharp snap of a whip. I could make out a door at the end of a long, dark hall. It was bathed in lights like the door to Jinnah. In the light, I saw flashes of a large wooden structure which danced to the rhythm of the deafening thunder of waves outside. My heart pulsed, awaiting my every breath, as if deciding if beating was worth it. Many of us, so terrified with fear, vomited and urinated constantly. I could hear the screams of those who disappeared into the night. I cried, "What hungry beast awaits our beaten bodies? What manner of creature awaits our souls behind the glaring light?" I froze with fear, paralyzed by uncertainty. Only the drive from behind pushed me closer and closer. As I panicked, I fought and screamed for my life, but was pulled through the door by my chains. The spray of the salty sea breeze blew a chill across my exposed body. The blood rushed from my head, and I turned around before losing consciousness to see the one-way door through which I would never return. I awoke to find myself on a massive canoe the size of a castle. We were then processed and carried to the belly of the beast. The bottom of hell had a gentler invitation. Igbo, Fulani, Wadabe, Hausa, Mandinka, Fon, Wolof, Kanuri, Chukwe, Dogon, Ashanti, Songhai, all lay side by side on the damp, dark wooden deck, stripped of our dress and adornments, stripped of our delicately fashioned jewelry, and most of all, stripped of our honor. Imams, chiefs, orishas, sheikhs, shamans, now mere cargo. The hum of screams of pain, weeping and death washed with the drumming of the sea. A stench that could span 1,000 years reeked with urine, feces, vomit, blood, sweat, and infection. The living lay stiff next to the dead. In the distance, a woman screamed for her child who surrendered in the cold, damp, infectious night. A muddle of prayers occupied the busy silence. Prayers of Islam, Vodun, Contemplate, Odu Ifa. In this dark hell, there was nothing but prayers to comfort us. On the far ocean, many in the madness heard greater promises whispered from the sea. They surrendered their life to the deep rather than to face the unknown that lay ahead. As we crossed this unspeakable void, we would forge the faces of our captors into our memory. Their cold white skin and the lifeless blue eyes, their stringy, colorless hair, dressed in strange garments, they seemed like monsters, beasts of prey waiting to eat our souls. And it was just our souls they wanted. We were told that after a life of demise, rape, and toil, the promise of a Christian glory would greet us when we expired. And expire is what we did best. As we, the children of Mother Africa, were lost to the night, a new world thousands of miles away would be born. And from the ashes of torment and the gutters of humanity, we survived the boat. We survived to tell our tales. We survived to survive again and again and again. As the ghostly ships rose out of the mist, a new horizon came into view. Before us lay the Americas, and in this new world we would know new horrors. Behind us, millions lay dead. But they are not dead, because we will remember them. They will never grow weary as long as we strive to reclaim, to retake all that was ours. They live in our hearts and in our being. We will teach our children their tales of glory and despair. Because from the ashes of destruction, a new nation has risen, the African diaspora. And one day, we shall all see our sweet Mother Africa again.
Yes, that was a serious 360 degrees. 360 degrees up. starting from the West Coast until it reached this part of the world. So vivid. I know for those of you who listen to me right now and know when them say Elmina Castle, where it bring up in you, there's no way you can go to Elmina Castle and go inside there and don't cry. No way. Everybody I know will go into that place, shed tears. When I hear you talk about the door of no return, and the church where them have, where white people used to pray to them God. Meanwhile, black people under in some dungeons are wait to be taken through the door of no return to somewhere where them don't even know. Because when them reach the door of no return, you go in, them carry them in the ship and put them under the ship. That means that some of them don't see land, don't see light until they reach over this side. And if the boat is too heavy, they would have thrown some of us overboard. And the lady said the shark, them used to follow the boat them, because them know say eventually a whole heap of black bodies will be thrown from that ship into the sea to become food for the sharks. Serious thing. Them afraid to tell us these things. The people them carry through Christianity and slavery, Islam and slavery, them carry through the Arab slave trade, the Portuguese. Actually, the Portuguese was the first set of Europeans to take way out of Africa and carry go somewhere else. And no one mentioned the travel across the Sahara into Europe, Spain and those places. It's a serious, serious thing. And them want to forget all of that. Meanwhile, them build up them castles and them empire after the blood, sweat and tears of African people. And when we talk about it, reparation, them says not them did do it. Them do have nothing to do with it. It's them four parents. Them four parents dead and gone. But what built up the four parents that them can come now and really suck our fight, live our fight, have a direct relationship with what took place 300-400 years ago. When you hear a man talk about, but you know, forget about that, you know, because it's not I to do it. It's not I to do it. That is what them say. It's not I to do it. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? All the things them with Cecil Rhodes do. The murder and killing. Well, King Leopold do. The murder and killing. And you are telling me now, say, after you really benefit from these murders and killings, you are telling me now, say, it's not you do it. It's your four parents. We forgive, but don't forget. And sometimes we don't even know if we want to forgive neither. This is a serious thing. These are the things where we have to really figure out. Meanwhile, we get cloaked up and involved in a them world of illusion, world of no love, no sympathy. This is where we have to think, man, that we don't get caught. You know, the ring a rosy, the pocket could have frozen, Ashama all fall down. We, African people, must break this chain where them bind with and continue to make us feel like, say, everything is okay. Don't worry, be happy. Some of us can be some of us can be happy, and some of us can stop worry. But if you really feel and know, say, there's something that happening in our history that causes us right now to be in the position where we're in now, you have to really search your head, man. Search your head.
Yes, greetings, Muta.
Blessed man.
We feel like we was in classroom that's man. Boy, it's a strong black history lessons you give the people them, you know. I have to salute you, man. I have to salute you to the max. No other program in Jamaica programming right now deal with the black history like you. And it's good. And trying to give the message and spread the black history to people, the students at UA. And we have want to tell the people we have a public lecture tomorrow. Well, today, what I'm going to talk about, Thursday evening, free for everyone, because we have pushed the black history at UA. And I am really the head cook and bottle washer for these seminar sessions. But I want to tell the people that we have I. Jabalani Tafari, we have Dr. Jelani Nair, we have Dr. Imani Tafari Amma, and Dr. Albert Taylor as a panel talking about black history and its relevance to black people. Tomorrow at the Mona, UE Mona, at the multifunctional room, which is near the main library, from 6 to 9. That's Thursday, that's today, the 12th of February. Free to one and all, because we are celebrating the centennial of Black History Month, started by Carter G. Woodson, February 1926. We're keeping on the tradition of Black History Month. This is the centennial, you know, and it's not just a black American thing, it's a black people thing worldwide. Just as we heard on the program, you know, the great achievements of black people from ancient times, Nile Valley civilization, from Ethiopia, Sudan, to Egypt, going down the River Nile. And Muta, I was tell people, me just recently was in Egypt, you know. It was long overdue. And when we see the pyramids, and we see the temple them, and we realize, it's black people build this. Nobody should refute that black people were the first builders of civilization on the planet.
Of course. But them say it to, you know, them say it to them archaeologists, them say it now.
Yes, and when you look upon the monuments, not for them the nose is damaged. Why? Because broad noses. When the Europeans saw that, them couldn't the site. Napoleon himself, yes. Yes, knock off the nose of the Sphinx, the great Sphinx in Giza Plateau. But anybody may really shout out to the people them, try and make a trip to Egypt and see the magnificence.
What was your occasion that you went there for? What was your occasion when you go?
When we go? No, I had it on my bucket list for years now. It's overdue by about 30 years between me and you.
Oh, yeah?
And every time it come up, some reason come up, we say, all right, let me leave that till the following year. And then the following year come and we procrastinate and we don't go. So I was there in January. And I was glad I was there because it was a reminder to me, and it should be a reminder to all black people. We are gods and goddesses living on this planet. We built the pyramids. We had Timbuktu University in Mali. We have the great churches of Lalibela carved out of solid rock. We have the wall of Zimbabwe, in Zimbabwe. All of these monuments of civilization are there on the continent right now. So black people have to realize they came from greatness. No, we did have this transatlantic slave trade. And we also had the Arab slave trade, which really is our Holocaust. We have our own Holocaust. We hear the white Jews talk about their Holocaust, but we have our Holocaust, but it's not a badge of shame, it's a badge of honor, because we are the black survivors. We here today on this rock of Jamaica, and all Africans in the diaspora who came to the West forcibly, because one of their ancestors were forcibly removed from the continent and brought here. But we have to be proud, because we're the black survivors. If they never survived that brutality, if they never had the will to keep living, we wouldn't be here today. And who has suffered more? Who has suffered more brutality than African people under this transatlantic slave trade? Nobody has suffered more. So we have our Holocaust, and we should be putting it out there to the world. We have suffered, you know, because the Jews wear that as a badge of honor. So let us wear that as a badge of honor. We survived. We came through. So all of you people there, don't be ashamed that your were enslaved, because you are a black survivor. Want people to remember that and know that. And we have lots in store on our Black History Month installment, 6 to 9, later on tonight. As I said, Dr.
You ever go to the Holocaust Museum in Washington?
Come again?
Have you ever been to the Holocaust Museum?
Which one?
In Washington.
Well, I'm due a visit there still, you know. I haven't.
No, which one you know? Which one you know?
Well, essentially, we have, you know, Liverpool and so forth. We have the colonial.
Yeah, we know about the Liverpool one. As a matter of fact, when I'm a poem them upon the wall of Liverpool.
Yeah, what you say?
Yeah, but we no, all right. Why am I mentioning it to you, see?
Yeah.
Is that the Jews them will not allow the world to forget the Holocaust.
Exactly. Their Holocaust.
And even though a whole heap of them who's living now was not part of that cruelty.
Yes.
Them teach them children and them children about what Hitler did to them. So we are saying, if the Jews can continue to do it and build a museum,
yes,
to make people come and see what was done to them,
yes.
Or is it that you have black people, not white people, black people? I tell we say them think they gone a long time. Why would they harp on it?
Yes, yeah, ignorance.
It's a problem.
Ignorance, Muta. It is a problem, and I'm in tandem with you on that. We need our Holocaust centers. We need one right here in Jamaica, in fact. And if you know, if life spare, I will be part of erecting a Holocaust museum right here in Jamaica. See? Because we need it. The people need to realize that it is, as I said, it's a badge of honor, not of shame, because nobody on this planet can say they suffered more than African people.
Yeah.
Yes, other people have suffered. Yes, the Jews suffered under Hitler. 6 million. They lost 6 million. We lost
Leopold killed 10 million.
Huh?
Leopold killed 10 million
10,
black people.
He slaughtered 10. There you go. So we
10 million.
Our population has been diminished significantly because of the cruelty of colonialism on the continent. I'm glad you mentioned Leopold and his evil regime in the Congo, which people seem to forget. Amputate young boys because they weren't working hard enough. Imagine you drawing rubber and so forth. If you don't work hard enough, then chop off one hand. And if you're still not working hard enough, to chop off the other. You know, this is the kind of brutality that we had to endure. All right? That was colonialism under the Belgium, King Leopold. And them need for pay reparations quick time. That seemed to have stalled. I know that was in the works a few years ago. It has stalled. I don't know what happened. Then we know the transatlantic slave trade. Many of us were worked to death. The truth is many of us, it wasn't a kind slavery, right? No, it was a very brutal regime. Let me tell you, in Jamaica, under the British rule, 1655, when they take over Jamaica, up until 1834, when we got so-called emancipation, right? They actually imported 1,300,000 Africans. That was the total number of Africans that were imported into Jamaica over that period. Guess how many were left in 1834? Only 300,000. Only 300,000 Africans remained in Jamaica in 1834. Now, what happened to the other million? So it wasn't a kind enslavement, because if it was kind, you'd allow the Africans to reproduce. If they reproduce, all you need is 2 children per family, and you maintain the same population.
Stud farm, them call it.
Stud farm, yes, but something went awry. Farm. The brutality and inhumanity, them lose all reason, right? The slightest provocation, they would just kill. They would just kill one of them slaves, because they just see it as property and say, "Me, I go buy another one." We were disposable. They weren't exercising pure rationality, you know. They weren't, because if you did, you would preserve the life. Even if it's livestock were treated better than the enslaved in Jamaica. May I tell you, listen, them import 1,300,000 and only 300,000 remain. That means the population diminished, right? It diminished. Now, in Africa, in America rather, the stats are different. They actually allowed the enslaved to reproduce. And it didn't import so many Africans into the U.S., but the population grew because they allowed them to reproduce. So they exercised a little bit more common sense and said, let's let them reproduce, and that way we'll have more slave labor. The slave masters here were not so rational and sensible. The slightest provocation. What? You look 2 times at a white woman. What? String him up, kill him. You know what? You spat
up to the 60s. Up to the 60s that happened in America.
Hang him, kill him. You know. So we were treated worse than livestock. See. So out of all of that, though, we are still here today. We are still here. That means that our foreparents had the resilience, the fortitude to survive that brutality and come through it. Because, listen, it was so serious on the plantation. You could have just killed yourself. You could have taken a machete and just cut your throat. You know, why go through all of that? Because they were hoping that their future generation would live a better life, would see some promise. So I want the people to realize, you know, don't take it for granted. You're here now because your ancestors went through hell, living hell. So don't take it for granted. Do something with your life. Do something constructive, positive. Let's stop the infighting and the bickering, right? We went through hell years back. Now we need to build. We need to build and become a world power again. We were great in the past. In the future, we must rise to be great again. Greatness is what it was. Let's not deal with mediocrity. Let's not be satisfied with a simple, mediocre life when you can rise to greatness. If we built the pyramids thousands of years ago, think what we can do today. See? So, that is my perspective on the matter.
Yeah, man, give thanks, man. Give
thanks. Tell
thanks.
people the Black History Forum will be on 6 to 9 at UWI campus, featuring Dr. Arvid Taylor, Dr. Imani Tafari Amma, I'm Jelani Tafari, Dr. Jelani Naya. I'm moderating it. It's going to be interesting.
Give thanks.
Give thanks, Muta, every time. Bless.
Yes, Michael Barnett coming through. That is very, very interesting about him going to Egypt. It's one place I don't reach yet. The nearest place I go to them was Israel and Ethiopia. I don't go to Egypt yet. I need to go there.
Free man.
Free man. Free man. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Muta.
Yeah, man, I listen, man.
Yeah, man. For real, man. King James are here, you know?
King James.
Hello?
I think you gone away, man.
Hello?
Yeah, I think say it gone away.
No, man, I see you way, man.
Oh. Me a chump a talk about you the other day.
Only me alone can talk to some still, you know.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, man, because some village and me and father, you know.
Okay.
So, I want to tell him to be merciful to Cuba, you know. Because I love Cuba, so I like for me to talk to you now. And he's a man who believes in me, so I'm not going to really trouble Cuba, you know.
Okay, if you say so.
I told man, finally me and myself on the radio now, so you know, take all the pressure off of Cuba, you know.
Alright.
So, see, you want me to treat something to say to you, but you can't pay a gospel tune for me.
So what?
You can't pay after me talk, don't talk to you can't pay a gospel tune for me.
A gospel tune?
Yeah.
Which one?
Everybody got to know who Jesus is.
Everybody don't know who Jesus is already, man.
But more you play make people know, some people don't know who Jesus is, you know. So you want to play
you tell them who Jesus is.
No, just more you play that tune still, you know.
No, you tell them who Jesus is now.
No, when listening to you, we talk.
Me say, you tell them who Jesus is. Me not have that tune there.
Alright, sir. Alright. So, Muta.
Yeah.
I feel here this year, you know, 2026, you know.
No, wait, no, hold on, no, man. Man, see, you're not going to tell the people them who Jesus is.
One next time, you know, next time.
Alright, next time, okay. Alright, next time.
So, it's time I passed through last year. I went 2025, you see it?
Yeah.
And
Hurricane,
they're in a category 5, you know?
Yeah, Hurricane Melissa, yeah, what happened?
You know, see, when Jesus, you thief Jesus, you know, you see category 5 come back on them door. And number 5 mean thief, you know, you understand?
Number 5, what?
I say number 5, when you cash back pay a thief, and a thief, then thief Jesus, and when Jesus here last year, you know?
Number 5, cash pot.
When you pay cash pot, number 5 a thief, you understand?
Yeah.
So me I say, the curriculum come as number 5 in a Jesus year, because Jesus born for number 25, then say Christmas Day, you understand?
At 25 born, then all you say 5.
No man, 25 Christmas Day.
No, you try 15 your thinking with the number, man. Because that's why I say hold on. Look why you say a category 5 hurricane. Remember you say a category 10, 15. You say a 5. No, you gone. No, I said Jesus born 25, 25th.
No,
so
a category 5 hurricane. So me I say, you see.
Yeah.
So you see, Jesus come back, Jesus then vex, because he come back as 5. You know me I say?
Who vex him come back as 5.
No, I vex, man.
Oh, I no vex.
I vex about him, man, because you see thief them. Eh?
No, me not see them. Me not see them. You have to go down now, do you know?
One name Pauline and one name Pauline, you know? You see, a Pauline...
Which part them come from?
Just, you know?
What?
You see 2 thief went on up by cross?
No, me not see them.
One of them named Pauline, you know?
Okay.
So, it's a Pauline when then could I see Jesus, you know, but Pauline never saved Jesus. He make Pauline to kill him. You understand?
You know Leaf Alive?
Yeah, yeah, man.
You know Leaf Alive, right?
Yeah, man.
You know Cersei? You know Cersei?
Eh?
You know Cersei?
Yeah, who should them are you?
No, me ask you the bush them me ask you about, man. Which one of them are me? Me no bush.
Yo, hear me I say.
You need some bush tea, man. Yo, me have to move. Me have to move. Yo. Me have to move. And me turn you on, what a thing. Me shouldn't turn you on, you know. No, me can't turn you off. Me have to move. Me have to move, yeah?
You're hacking, not you.
Me have to move, okay.
No, me talk to you.
Yes, hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, hear me?
Oh, yeah, man, here now.
Eh?
Yes, Muta. I'm calling from the States. My name is Taj.
Okay.
Are you hearing me?
Yeah, man, I hear you, man.
Oh, yeah. You know, I'm just calling to say, man, you know, you've been such an inspiration to me. And, you know, I listen to most of your videos, you know, on YouTube.
Okay.
So you really kind of shape my perspective, you know, African consciousness, you know. And I've been really having a problem here because, you know, it seems like nobody really understand African history. They don't even know African history.
Well, them not teach it in school, you know, so.
Yeah,
really
I know.
teach it in
I got
school,
school
yeah.
at Jamaica. I got school, you know, high school and primary and all of that. So we experienced all of that. But I'm saying, you know, something have to be done about that. Don't you think so? And I know you'll agree.
Well, we are trying to do something about it with this program now.
Yeah, fine. I really teach a lot, you know.
You
And
was listening a while ago?
People to say that again?
You was listening to the program a while ago about where I was playing?
Yes, yeah, I was.
Okay. Because them things are very important. See, we have to use what we have at our disposal to do what need to be done by any means necessary. And this is one of the ways that I choose to do it, you know?
For real. Because most time when we talk to people there, you know, I'm very passionate about it. So when I talk, you know, I get loud and things, but they don't understand like the passion there, you know? Because I mean, we keep them in such a state of brainwash. And when I tell them, you know, because I listen to a lot of lecturers from Dr. Clark, John Henry Clark.
Henry Clark, yeah.
And Dr. Ben and Dr. Ivan and all of them man there. Take on to the up and all of them man there.
That's good that you're here,
and
man.
I
I
study
read
Rastafari and see the struggle. Say that again?
No, I say I'm glad to hear say I read them. Not many people read them now at all.
This time in America, you know, I have to, you know, have that knowledge.
Yes,
because it really has helped to straighten eye, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, man, give thanks, brethren. Give thanks. All right?
For real, man. I hope one day I can really meet you when I come to Jamaica. I hope that we can make that possible.
All right, yeah, man. Keep listening, man. Keep listening.
All right, give thanks, fire.
Yeah, blessed, man. Blessed.